Have you heard of Chi, Prana, or life energy? In today's episode, we will chat about what energy is by exploring the main energy centers in the body. This will enable us to better understand what energy work is and eventually how we can consciously shift our energy. To help us with this, I've invited a most fascinating being, consciousness coach and owner of Divine Healing, Chetna Madoo. Chetna, welcome to Echoes of Eternity.
Thank you so much. It's really good to be here, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm really excited about this episode. I think before we even get into it, I just want to say I'm so glad we have this opportunity to, discuss these kind of topics before exploring, like much deeper or, other practices that people usually just want to jump into, like meditation, shadow work. I think we have this opportunity to lay a foundation, right? So I'm really excited about that. Now, you aren't a life coach, you're not a psychologist, right? You're a consciousness coach. So do you want to maybe tell us what exactly is a consciousness coach?
So I gave myself that title because there's so much different facets of work that I do that I found myself coaching people more from a spiritual aspect. So, and funny enough, my name, Chetna, actually means consciousness. So that's where this came to me, in terms of bringing people into conscious awareness of themselves. And that's what a consciousness coach that I've called myself. But the work that I do is very integrative. So it is coaching, but as you mentioned about energy, so it's incorporating energy work as well as working with the subconscious, the mindset as well.
Okay, when I came across it, obviously I think many of us, and again I'm assuming, right, have never heard of a consciousness coach before, and I think it's a really fascinating place to be, and I mean even to have a consciousness coach help you with, like you're saying, mindset and energy, and I think it'd be pretty cool. Thanks for being here as well today.
Thank you.
Before we define what energy is and get into the main energy centers and so on, do you want to maybe share your opinion on why you feel it's so important for us to understand energy, right, in general, before we explore topics like meditation and other well-being practices?
Okay, so just let's look at just life in itself, right? So if we look around us, what is not of energy? Like there's so much around us that has energy, and even if you just go back to school in terms of science, I mean, you learn about energy. Energy can't be destroyed, but it can be transferred or transformed. And knowing that there's so much, there's energy all around us, there's energy flowing through us, just knowing how and understanding it better will help you navigate through life, because you understand yourself better, you understand your environments better. It gives you the opportunity or the awareness how to interact with it. So to basically answer your question is, in terms of just understanding energy, it'll help you to just navigate through life a bit better.
Yeah, so I think, like you're saying, it's we all feel certain emotions, right, and energies throughout life. And I think having this conversation that we're going to have today will hopefully allow us to be aware of certain energies and emotions that we are feeling. So like becoming fully aware of it. And then, we'll find a deeper appreciation of how to then shift that into like a more positive state, right?
Because you're not always comfortable if we're aware of certain emotions or things of ourselves. Often, if it's something we don't want, that obviously becomes uncomfortable. But where my purpose comes in is to help support people in, when you are in that awareness, how do you shift it? How do you shift past that? Because a lot of stuff, I mean, we each have stories, right? So we have traumas or experiences that we've had And knowing that in this moment, even something that happened years and years ago still has an impact on you. And if you're still holding on to that energy within your body, it has an impact on you in your current space.
No, I can definitely relate to that, and I think hopefully a lot of people can. And something else that we might touch on throughout this episode again is this feeling that we are not our emotions, right? Or I don't know, are we like, some people hold on so tightly to certain energies, I want to say, right? And again, the same holds true for the emotions and energies we don't want to feel. And then it does consume us, and then we feel that we are that emotion.
Yeah. You see, so if, from my understanding, right, your emotions are part of you, right? But it forms part of your energy. So your energy is not just that. So remember, your energy is also your mindset, your thoughts. Okay. So I think as we progress and I give a bit more explanation in terms of energy itself and that, it'll put things in perspective.
Okay, no, so let's then, on that note, right? let's get in, and I guess you're gonna school us a bit, and
Okay. But
what is energy?
I'm going to keep it really brief. We can go quite deep into it, but I think just for the understanding, the basic understanding of it, what I'm going to go through, right? So, as I mentioned, energy can't be destroyed, but it can be changed or transformed. So, we have energy flowing through us, we have energy flowing around us. And an easy way to explain the energies, I'm sure, the audience as well as you, we've come to a point where maybe we're in a space or with people and we sense vibes.
Yes.
Right? That's the energy, okay? We're sensing energy that is around us. But remember, every thought, word, and action that we choose affects our energy. Okay, so we have something called energy centers, also known as chakras. Okay, so there's many energy centers within our physical body, not tangible on a subtle level, but there's 7 main ones that we work with, right, in order to help us on all levels of our being, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly go through them and then maybe give an example of one and see how it goes. So your first one is, and I'm using English terminologies, there's obviously Sanskrit names to these, but I'm going to use the English terminology. So we have the first chakra or energy center at the base of your spine, known as your root or your base chakra, right? Then you have your sacral, which is just above that. Then we have your solar plexus or navel chakra, which is kind of between your navel and your diaphragm area. Okay, I'm using hand actions just to show it. Then you have your heart, your throat, your third eye, and then your crown. So those are the 7 main ones that we work with. Now, as I mentioned, each one of them have a connection with different aspects of us, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, right? So let me use one. I'm going to use the solar plexus one or the navel one, purely because I think a lot of people right now are going through anxiety, or when we're feeling stressed or anxious, we feel, and most people would feel that sort of knot or something in there, right? So with me saying that, that's exactly the energy that this energy center holds. When we are feeling anxious, stressed, also low self-esteem, willpower, or lack of it. Also, the emotions that may sit there is one of blame or shame, feeling ashamed or just blaming, So now with that being said, remember we live in a world of duality. Okay, there's always 2 sides to stuff. So same with the energy center. So I've labeled all the side, which is sort of heavy, the shadow side of stuff. But the light side of it is joy. So think about it. When you enjoy, would any of the other things exist? Would you be stressed if you enjoy?
No.
So that's what we want to bring. You want your energy center to be open and balanced, and that's when you will feel joy, you will feel empowered, you will feel confident, so yeah. And then on a physical level, which I've omitted to mention, is because it's in this region, right, it also, that energy center is connected to our digestive system, and as well as a little bit of the respiratory, because it's around the diaphragm area as well.
Okay. There's so much, right? And this is just like one of the energy centers. Yeah. And maybe if we can, so, I'm just trying to think, and maybe some people will struggle with this concept of duality that you mentioned. And it sounds very contradictory that the same energy center can hold, a positive and a negative almost, right? So how do we explain that to people, or try to help them understand that concept of duality better?
Okay. So let me just take a step back, right? So look at just emotions, for example, happy and sad, right? So, often you hear people say that you have to experience sadness in order to appreciate happiness, okay? So they can, from time to time kind of keep swapping. And that's the same with an energy center, right? So I'm saying, it could be you wake up in the morning, you're feeling anxious, but something happens during your day and then joy comes in, okay? So it doesn't mean that you're always going to keep that sort of energy in your space. It could be a general thing where, you generally are an anxious person, for example. But what maybe just keeping it simple for now is that when there's a blockage or when there's an imbalance, you'll find that you lean majority of the time towards the one side. So what we want to do is we want to help shift your energy so that we can bring it back into balance, more to a central. If you look at a scale, you've got the two extremes. In life, we always want to be at that midpoint. We want to find that balance, and it's the same with an energy center. So, for example, you don't want to be overconfident. You want to be confident enough for what is in your that's aligned to your truth. Okay, so does that make a bit more sense?
That makes sense. And I actually like that you said that and you use that example at the end of confidence. I think it's very easy to forget the center, right? People are drawn, not always, but they feel like the extreme is where you need to be. If you aren't very happy, then you're sad, right?
True. Yeah, true.
But it's not the case. There's a balance. So thanks for explaining that. And maybe we can, if you can, let's go through each one, right? Like we've explained the navel like energy center, right? And what that represents. If we can just briefly touch on the other ones and, just like what sort of emotion does that one, I don't want to say control, but is the energy storehouse or linked to it? Yeah.
All right. So your base chakra, or your root chakra energy center, think of it if you just think of life, right? A tree is rooted. It gives it stability, right? So the same thing with our root energy center. It affects your stability, your security, feeling balanced, also your energy levels, feeling energized versus...
Okay, so your general level of...
Yeah, so inertia, right? But it also then has to do with passion, okay? Mm-hmm. So that's sort of where the root chakra sits, right? Emotions here usually would be, I think if you think about it, if you think about fear, it's not of fear, the root chakra, but it's more about, I would just say anything that's going to bring you into balance. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then moving on to your sacral. So your sacral is located around the reproductive system, right? So physically, that's where, I missed out on the physical part of the root, right? Mm-hmm. So it's from your base to your legs. So it's got to do also with physically your legs and movement. Okay, so think about movement. So anything that makes you feel stagnant or stuck, that's where this is the energy center we will work with.
Okay.
Sorry. And then going back to the sacral. So the sacral being the reproductive area, think about it for not for female only, but males as well. It holds the energy of creation. Okay. So this is where our creativity comes from, or courage. Okay. And then also self-worth. So self-worth is something that would sit in that area of that energy center. We have chatted about the navel, so I'm just going to move up
Yep.
to the heart. So your heart, I think we all always attribute it to emotions, right? Okay, so it is. But what sits there is the two domineering emotions that we live in, we experience in life, which is love and fear. Okay, and also hatred. And I know hatred's a strong word, right? But it's something that's so deep that is something that can affect our heart chakra so much, or energy center, right? So those are the emotions. And physically, obviously, it's got to do with the heart organ. And so that's the heart space. Then we move up to the throat. The throat one is also very interesting, and I often get clients with regards to blockages in the throat energy center. So think about what this is, your voice, okay? It's about speaking, communication, but not just external communication. It's also about speaking your truth, expressing yourself. And often, we may not be aware of it, but communication is also about being heard, feeling listened to. So, these are some of the aspects that would affect your throat chakra. The emotions that sit there is grief or gratitude, okay? If you think about when you're going through grief, right, a lot of people would feel like a lump in their throat, okay? But also when you go through, deep gratitude, you'll feel that lump, or deep grief, right? So you'll feel that lump in your throat. So those are the emotions that sit there in terms of that. Then moving up into your third eye. So your third eye is your connection to your higher, your inner wisdom, right? So your intuition. And it's also located in the mindset. So usually when we get too much in our heads, then we also build up a bit of an energy of anger that sits a lot with that, okay? But there's a whole host of others. I'm just giving you like a brief version of it. And then moving up into so the third eye is also your mindset, right?
Yes.
So moving up into your crown chakra, this is where we are now tapping beyond just, our physical body. It's tapping into the higher power. And that can be anything, right? For each person, that's different. That could be different in terms of what their belief system is, where, their religion, culture, etc. As long as whatever that higher power is for you, it's your connection with that. Okay? And that would actually be your whole being. So there's no physical organ. Okay?
Yes.
So those are your energy centers, and a little bit about each of them. But then we also have an energy field around us. And that energy field is referred to as your aura. So I think many people use this terminology. Okay, and your energy field around you it differs from person to person, but also within an individual, depending on what space you're in at that time, affects your aura in the sense of the expansion. So your aura is an energy field that expands beyond your physical body. It can expand to about 2 meters, 2.5 meters beyond. So the distance we're sitting in now, our auras are overlapping, right?
Yeah.
So when your aura is healthy and strong, so that's when your energy is sort of more balanced and unblocked, flowing. Okay, energy is about flow, right? So when your aura is strong and healthy, we can't always choose where we are at and who we're with. And, you do get people who kind of drain your energy or are negative, or you go in environments where you just feel, I just want to get out of there. When your aura is healthy and strong, when you remove yourself from that space, it's almost like if you think of a dog shaking it off, that's what it kind of does, because your aura then kind of shakes that off and you feel back to yourself. But when your aura is weak and your energy is unbalanced or blocked in a more stronger way, then what happens is you become a sponge and you start to absorb energy that is not yours. And then you remove yourself from that person or that environment and you still feel this heaviness. And sometimes you don't recognize that it's from there. You go merrily doing your thing and you're like, oh, I just feel so drained, or I feel so sad and I don't know why I'm sad, for example. Not recognizing or realizing that it's not yours. You carrying or you absorb stuff that's not yours. So part of the work that I do is helping to clear energy that is not yours. Because if it's not yours, why you want to deal with it? Yeah. You know, so then it's more about working with what is your energy and so forth. And just coming back to one thing that I mentioned about, if we in people or environments that are negative or draining, it doesn't mean that at the time when you're with that person that you also can't allow yourself and strengthen your energy to rather radiate good energy so that it can filter through whoever or wherever you are, rather than that filter into you filter. And this is where energy becomes, if you understand it and you can know how to help yourself, you can not only have a positive impact on yourself, but on others as well.
No, I think that's brilliant. It's, I think there's so much in what you've said that we can unpack almost, right? I want to just maybe step back a little bit and, we're talking about these 7 main energy centers, right? Let's say, for example, because now we've said that, certain centers are linked to certain either emotions or, physical aspects of who we are. Is it possible that one of your centers, right, is, let's say, depleted almost or blocked, okay, but the other centers maybe not so much, right? How does this sort of then work, especially then with your aura that you mentioned? I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but how does it then affect that aura, right? If you, let's say, like 6 out of the 7 hypothetically is well balanced, but there's one that's, you've entered in an environment or you're around someone that's really making you anxious, let's say, or let's use anxiety as an example. How does that then affect your energy field, right?
That is a bit of a tricky question, but I'll answer it to the best of what I can understand. Is that, remember, it's something that's always changing, right? So in that way, it doesn't mean that your aura is going to be weak, right? And even if there's more than one, it doesn't mean. It just means that is something that you may need to work on in order to better equip yourself to help yourself with the energies that are around you. So in the example that you're asking me, where one is really, that's something that's not really going to affect your aura in such a big extent. It's going to affect you more personally, because it's stuff that you have to work through to help find that balance within yourself. So if you're anxious, the other person or the environment is going to merrily carry on with what it's doing, right? Your aura is maybe going to pick up on a bit. But if you let yourself get to a point where your that one that is blocked or unbalanced can have the effect on the rest of them as well. Because think about it, right? It's flow. Okay. So you won't often get one that's only blocked and everything else is flowing. There'll be blockages here and there. There'll be flow here and there. There might be some that are more dominating in terms of blockages and imbalances, and that's where we work on, right? So if you think about it, let's just start from the bottom. If you feel safe, secure, and balanced, right, it will help you to feel a little bit more worthy, courageous, creative, right? And if you're feeling that, your self-esteem is there. You experience more joy. And as you experience more joy, you can experience more love. From experiencing all of that, you'll be able to express better. By expressing better, you actually feel more in tune with yourself, right? And in that whole way, you are feeling more connected to the collective, to the oneness, to the higher power. So think about that flow. And there may be a blockage or an imbalance somewhere along there. It does not mean that everything's falling apart or, you're not going to be able to give off a good vibe. So that does not, and I think that's maybe what you were referring to, like if there's one blocked, am I going to give off a bad vibe?
Exactly.
The other person may sense a bit of anxiety from you or feeling like, okay, you're a bit anxious. But it does not mean that it's going to affect your aura in a way where if you absorb it, you then can do something within yourself to feel like, okay, now I can keep my energy in a good space.
No, I think yeah,
I hope that answers.
no, it does.
a bit
It
of
really does, and I think it's important to yeah. I'm asking, I guess, tough questions, but I think it's important just for myself as well, and hopefully for people listening in as well. So again, I'm gonna ask maybe a tough question, right? And there's no right and wrong answers to all of these things. We're just having a discussion, trying to enlighten each other and all of us. And I want to talk about going into a space, or let's say we are having a conversation with someone who is, let's say, depressed or very sad, right? Or even very angry, a very negative emotion, right? Let's say they're experiencing a very negative emotion, and you're coming into that environment. Now, most people would say that, you know, you need to be there for that person, okay? What does that actually mean then, right? What does it mean to be there for someone, but at the same time, almost protecting your aura or your energy?
That is actually a brilliant question, because this is something where brings me to the protection of your aura. Okay, because you think of your like an eggshell point, right? So we have different layers, and we can get into that in another conversation. But when it's like, think of an eggshell. If your eggshell is solid, right, but energy can still filter through, it means that you can filter out, but whatever's coming in won't penetrate. Okay, so it'll bounce back off and release. And that's kind of what you want. You want to create your aura to be strong and healthy. And yes, you're having a bad day, maybe your aura is a bit not that great, but if your protection is there, it doesn't really matter. Because like you said, you want to be there for that person. So you can be there for that person, but you do not have to absorb their sadness or whatever they're experiencing. In that way, you let your energy, your positive or your light energy, start to help them. Sometimes, and this is what's really beautiful about energy, is that, you know, often we think we need to say words or have like physical, like, you know, give them affection. Sometimes merely just your presence, which is your energy, can make a difference. So, you know, often people will say, you know, they feel calm around certain people, you know, and it's not that that person's doing anything, they're just being, and that's your energy. So to complete answer, you know, that example that you gave, is that we have to protect our energies, and that's something, you know, it takes a bit of understanding as well as work for us to do that. Energetically, we can create an energy field and strengthen it. So as we're sitting here right now, right, so just if you had to just be in awareness of like this big circle or bubble around you, right, and the more you just focus on it, the more you almost feel like it's getting stronger and stronger. I don't know if maybe you can do it with me, and then just try and feel this bubble, okay? And just as you feel it getting stronger and stronger, and with your feet being flat on the ground, almost just feel like you're being anchored. Your energy is rooting into Mother Earth. Roundedness is very important to help keep us balanced, right? So as you feel this bubble in your rootedness, you almost will have the sense of, okay, I'm feeling a bit stronger, I'm feeling a bit more centered. That in itself can help, you know, and being there for that person, you would just be support as you would normally do. I mean, each person would support another person in whatever way. The biggest influence is if you have fear, okay? So if you're going there, no, I want to comfort her, but I don't want to absorb this energy, you're going to absorb it. Because, you know, that saying is like, what you focus on, you shall attract. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
or what you resist, you shall attract, right? What you resist will persist, and then and you will attract it. So, you know, does that answer?
No, it does. It does. And then I think even on that note, so I think, yeah, hopefully now, even just for myself, right? Because you always worry, you know, am I doing enough to be there for the person, right? And like you're saying, sometimes just by your positive energy or your strong aura, it sometimes is enough, because you always worry, like, am I doing enough? Do I need to hug this person? You know, do I need to say something positive? And sometimes just being present there is enough. And something else you mentioned, I think at the beginning as well, like the words that we use, not only that we have or speak when we're speaking to other people, essentially, but even the words that we say to ourselves, that can affect your energy, right? And
Just thinking it can affect it.
and that's so scary, right? Because I think that's the trap that is so easy to fall into. Just thinking it. It doesn't mean if we don't say it, but we've already thought about it. I don't know, in your experience, how do we then, I don't want to use the word prevent it because I think that's very difficult, but how do we catch ourselves like, okay, so let's use an example to make this a bit easier for everyone, right? Let's say I've just had this negative thought about myself. I've already thought it now, okay? So it's affected my energy in some way. What do I then do to change that, or to not let that sink in, almost like the sponge you were saying?
Right. So first thing is awareness, that you recognize that you've had that thought, or that negative thought. So two things. One, you could shift it to a positive, but it's not always easy to shift from negative to positive, especially if you really worked up and you're feeling this, I don't know, maybe you got pissed off with something.
Yeah, let's use
like,
it.
right? And you like, you swearing the person in your head, right? And I'm going to come to a second part of that now. But you've now already swore them in your head, right? So knowing that you've done that and it's now affected your energy, right? You can't just go, oh, I'm like, I'm sending love to that person, or and I'm okay, I'm happy, I'll feel calm, because you can't make that switch, if it's that extreme. Mm-hmm. What you can do is bring it back to a neutral point, okay? And a beautiful gift that we have is our breath, which your breath is not just oxygen to your body, it's life force energy. It brings mental clarity, emotional balance, and physical well-being. So using your breath in that moment of just coming back, breathing, and being conscious of your breath, because we breathe every day, right? But conscious breath, being aware of your in-breath and your out-breath, that in itself will help neutralize and not let you go like, oh, why am I thinking like this now? I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have thought that. What you're doing is then just, you're going into brain candy, and you're just like taking that negative thought, and then you actually just making it worse. Okay. So what you want to do is neutralize it. Okay. Using your breath is a good tool. There's other techniques and tools that you can use, which maybe over time we can share. But for now, simple, keep it to your breath, just bring, and then focus on the present moment, what you're doing. So you swore this person, but now focus on what take a deep breath, okay? Try and not push it aside, because you don't want to also suppress, but you just want to kind of get it and move on with what you're doing at the moment. Mm-hmm. And before you know it, that anger starts to deplete, right? And yes, maybe the impact of it is still there, which obviously that we would have to work with, but that intensity is gone. And just on that note, the other part that I wanted to mention is that, say you saw someone in your mind, but they're sitting like they're in your space, right? And you putting a smile on your face and you swearing them in your head. That person is bound to feel uncomfortable. Okay? Even though there's a smile on your face, there's something that we all have that we can start to almost feel that energy. You might not know why. You might just feel uncomfortable. You feel like, I don't want to be near that person. Something's going to happen because that energy is being filtered. Okay? So that is something to be aware of, that you may not say it, but if you think it, it already has an impact.
I think that's so important for all of us to remember. And it's not easy, but like you're saying, it's about having that awareness. And it's a practice, right? That awareness takes practice. And even the conscious breathing, right, is so important. It's like you're saying, we breathe all the time, so it's very easy to forget the power that we have, just in controlling our breathing. I want to come back though to something we chatted a little bit about earlier, and it's coming back to your own energy and aura. And sometimes we have to be in an environment that makes us uncomfortable, or we're just feeling bad vibes of someone, right? And we just feel this, like I've experienced it myself, okay, where you will walk into a room and there's just someone there that for some reason annoys you, right? You don't know this person, you don't know their story, I mean, you don't even know their name, right? Like, but they just for some reason annoy you, and it's either because they're very happy or I don't know what it is. It's just something, like how do we explain that? And yeah,
Okay. So this goes a little bit deeper, right? So I'm going to try and keep it simple. So yes, that's got to do with energy. So say, for example, what you said now, that person could be very bubbly, right? And say you in a space where, you're a bit stressed and things are going. That energy of that bubbliness is something you so want because you're going through like a crappy time, right? So that's a trigger. That would be a trigger for you. So it may be, in this case, may not be that person. That person's energy is triggering you because there's something in you that is not flowing. Okay, so that's one way of explaining it. The other thing it could be, say for example, it is a person. As you develop your awareness and more in tune with your energy, you'll also start to feel other people's energy just by walking in a room, right? And being an empath like me means feeling people and their energy is you keep neutral, and that's important because you can't isolate yourself, and you can't be like, oh, I'm only going to be around. Yes, you can choose to your support structure to have people that you like, but not always can we have people like in a work environment, for example. You can't choose who your work colleagues are going to be. So in that case, you have to try and be as neutral as you can to that person. I'm trying to just see, when you ask that question, is it how do you deal with that person, or is it just how do you manage that energy?
well, I think it's always difficult, right, to deal with that person, right? And this is why it's so important, and I'm going to highlight it here because everything we're talking about comes back to knowing yourself, right? And just that awareness. So how do you deal with that for yourself? Because you can't, yes, you may be able to influence other person's energy by your own energy, if I understand everything we've discussed so far. But I guess then the question is, how do we deal with ourselves in that moment?
That's a journey, okay? Because that is, a lot of self-work, self-reflection, self-discovery, and in turn empowering yourself.
Now we've mentioned everything comes back to knowing yourself and being aware. How can someone, I guess, practice or go on this journey, and it's a long journey and there's probably lots of things you can do. How would I, if like today, I'm like fascinated by everything we've spoken about, I want to be more aware of my energy, right? What's the one thing I can kind of do to start that journey?
Awareness is key. So start observing your thoughts. That would be, so just, and not to say that you need to start changing it, right? Just observation, self-observation of watching yourself talk in your mind even is important, and obviously your words as well. Then as you become aware, you'll be like, sure, I think about this often, or I think very limiting of this, or I think very negatively of that. That awareness is there. Then that gives you an indication of what do I need to work on. And it's a journey from there as awareness comes, you find stuff that you need to shift that is going to help you cope better with yourself, with life itself, and that's where you start journeying it. So it's observation and awareness, that's key. The one thing I do want to just put in there is we all have a unique vibration, okay? But the frequency we vibrate at changes. Okay, so think of tuning into a radio station, for example. You're in a certain frequency, you're listening to that radio station. And if you don't like the music or what's being spoken about, you'll change the radio station, right? Now that's awareness. We give off a frequency, and the frequency we give off is what we're going to attract. So for example, many of us may experience this through life where we keep attracting similar people or similar situations, right? And we're like, why is this happening? Not realizing we're giving off that frequency to attract that. So the key of awareness is important, because when you're aware that I keep attracting these type of people, that's when you've got to go within and understand, why am I attracting those type of people? One within me is, there's maybe it's some sort of trauma, or something that you've got to work on in order to overcome that. So that, I'm going to use an example, and I've experienced this in my life, is being a people pleaser, right? And when you're a people pleaser, you'll continuously attract people that will use, abuse, take advantage of you, right? And this is where we have to then look at, okay, so why do I so need to please people, right? And it's we can go very deep with this. I don't want to go down that road right now. But when you are in a way that this is the frequency I'm giving off that I have like this label on my head, use me, abuse me, when you're aware that you're doing that, that's when you have to step back and do your inner work. Okay, and this is the journey that I take clients on, is to help them with the inner work. Energy is just part of it, because but the energy helps you to understand yourself, and then those things that the energy picks up is what we work on to help you to, improve or create the life you want.
I think that's really, really profound, and I think it's a good first step. It's something, I think, especially for those people that are already on the journey of getting to know themselves and so on, when you reach a certain point, you forget what that first step was, and it's just being aware, just observing yourself and your thoughts and so on. And even this that you mentioned now, about your energy or the frequency that, you vibrate at, attracts the same frequency. I think, we could probably have a whole conversation on that, right? Because it's so important, but we'll leave that for another time. But I want to ask a very, let's say, silly question.
There's no silly questions, but go ahead.
Each energy, right, center that you mentioned, I would assume that is also linked to some element and a color, right? And I'm just saying it's silly because, and I could be very wrong here, but do you ever, or have you ever experienced where, in a situation where people feel like wearing certain colors, for example, right, affects certain energy centers and then affects your aura and stuff like that?
So this can be a whole conversation, but I'm gonna touch on it, right? So each of your energy centers, and there's many things out there that you can use to help them. Sound. Okay, sound being one of them, sound vibrations. Now, each of the energy centers have a certain tone that, using that tone in a sound, whether it be an instrument or maybe, just chanting that vibration, can help to shift that energy center. And as you mentioned with color, just think generally, like there are certain colors, like if you think yellow is bright, vibrant, it makes you think of the sun, and it's joy. And that's of your navel center, okay, your solar plexus. So each chakra has a color associated with it. I can briefly go through them if you'd like.
So I think, so sorry to cut you off there. So let's use that one as an example, right? So if I had to dress up in all yellow, God forbid, but if I had to dress up in all yellow, right, would that somehow trigger some sort of psychological change?
Okay, it depends on in your space, right? So for example, if you're really sad, and it's different for everyone, and I think this is a bit of a tricky one to answer, because color therapy can be used in many forms. Doesn't mean like you have to wear the thing, right? So it could just be closing your eyes and bringing that color into your space, for example. It depends on how much you like yellow to wear, because if you go out being this like spotlighted, and you're a bit of an introvert, it's not going to work for you. It's going to actually make you more anxious. And that's the same. Yellow is of the solar plexus, so it's going to do two things. So it's either going to bring you joy, it's going to make you feel more anxious. So you have to watch in terms of how you use that. And this is where, further knowledge is needed in order for you to understand. And it can differ from person to person. So you've got to see, if I'm working with a client and, there's this, say for example, let's use that, right? We have to do a bit of work where they get to a space where, like, right, I'm ready for joy. Then we can bring in the color yellow, and that will just help to create that flow for that energy center. But if they're really angry and I'm trying to bring yellow in, it ain't gonna work. We have, maybe then in that way, there might be something at that point I could use that's different. Maybe just energy work, which is one of the modalities that I use is channeling energy. Reiki being one of those modalities, and channeling energy to help unblock and shift and balance stuff. Otherwise, I could use sound, because that's a little bit less, invasive, and that tone could maybe help. There's so much more out there that is connected. There's even, certain movements or postures you can do, like, for example, in yoga, that can help with the different chakras. There's essential oils, scent. Like, think of your senses, right? Seeing, and so for example, color, you can see the color, right? Or smelling, touching. For example, when you're feeling ungrounded, just hugging a tree. I know it sounds weird, but like hugging a tree, connecting with Mother Nature, sitting on the grass, those are things that you can do, and that will help with your root chakra. So there's so many variants of what we can do to help our chakras. But it also, one may work for you and may not work for the next person. So you've also got to try. We're unique. You've got to see what is going to work for you.
No, I think thanks for sharing that, and it's so important as well. Like, just that you're saying that there's no one size fits all.
And there's no quick fixes. So unfortunately, in terms of our journey, if we really want to better ourselves, it's not like, okay, I'm going to go to this person and they're going to fix me, and then I'm going to be, they're going to align my chakras and balance it and all of that, and I'll be sorted. And that brings me up to an important point, because I often tell my clients, you after a session, like, we've done the best we could right now. Your chakras could be aligned and balanced and all of that. But you walk out of here, you're driving, a taxi cuts you, and you decide to get all worked up. All your chakras are gone a bit wonky again, So remember, but it doesn't mean that now, I have to go back to Chetna to sort myself out. It just means you've got tools, your breath. So in that moment, after you've got all worked up about the taxi cutting you, you can just center yourself again, breathe, and come back to a bit of calmness, and then that flow happens again, So it's just more where I am here to support people, guide people through it. Obviously, the work that I do also helps to shift stuff, but there's also work that I give to my clients that they need to do to empower themselves. I don't want to be anyone's crutch, and I'm sure in terms of the work that people do, you don't want to feel dependent, like totally dependent on something or someone, because that creates a weakness,
No, I think it's so important, like everything you said, but even this whole idea of it's a journey, it's about work. There is no one time fix everything kind of concept out there, but it's about learning about the tools that you have available, and it can be something as simple as your breath. And I think I just want to also highlight that you might take a liking to a certain practice, right? And I want to say we don't all have the time to do everything, and you don't need to do all these different practices. And I think that's also important for people to understand. Yes, at the beginning, go and explore and find what you feel comfortable with, because again, there's no magic pill. Isn't this is going to work, right? It's what you're comfortable with and what you can fit into your schedule. That's also quite important. You don't have to feel like it's a forced thing, because I suppose it doesn't work then, right? And something that's so important, and you mentioned it, I think, as well, in passing, it triggered a thought for me. It's about being present. Everything comes back to just also being present. And that, okay, personally, I find very difficult at times, right? You get so caught up. You forget that something as simple as just, okay, hugging a tree, but like, just feeling the ground, or just feeling the warmth of the sun, things like that, it can change so much in a moment.
I mean, just, often people, when life becomes overwhelming and you feel you're literally on in a rat race, and just there's no, And the mind will tell you, I've got no time. I can't even take a moment to breathe or go to the toilet or whatever the case may be. But that moment is what you really, really, really need, right? So and I've, clients that have done this have just, it was like such a wow moment, that in that moment, just stop. Like everything feels like it's just moving at a fast pace. And if you just stop, take a deep breath, bring yourself back to this present. Your breath brings you immediately back to the present moment, right? That in itself just calms you down, and you'll be like, oh, now I know what I need to do. Because in that moment, your mind might have been so scattered because there's so much to do that you even forgot the simplest thing to do. But when you come to a bit of calmness, you find that your awareness is a bit sharper. So your clarity comes and you're a bit more focused, right? So things then start to be put into perspective. So to answer also what you were asking now, is that the awareness is key. In that moment that you are aware that, you know what, I'm just out of it. I'm just feeling out of sorts and I'm feeling overwhelmed. All you need to tell yourself is breathe, and then breathe. So as you breathe, you come back to this moment. This is the moment you have power in. The past is done, it's over. You cannot undo it or change it in any way. The future is yet to come. Okay? So if we look at what emotions that these bring to us, the past would usually bring whatever we triggered by. For example, it will bring anger, irritation, frustration, sadness, whatever, right? Because it's our past experiences that hold all these emotions. Right now, this present moment, is there any emotion? There may not be anything, right? So this is your power. This is your present moment is your power. Your future is most likely going to bring anxiety and fear. Okay, so when you feel like you're caught up in these emotions, know that you're either in the past or the future. You're not in the present. So just taking a nice deep breath, being in the here, in the now, will allow you to feel that power and say, right now, what do I need to do? And yes, that emotions might still linger. That's where the inner work comes, right? But every time that happens and you keep bringing yourself, eventually that just becomes smaller and smaller, and then you can kind of just stay in the present moment for longer.
No, I think that's 100% and so profound, and it's something so simple, and I think we take it for granted, especially in today's day and age. We want something that looks extravagant, but we forget there's so much power in the present. Thank you so much for enlightening us. I really had a good time here. I've learned a lot. I hope everyone listening in has learned a lot as well. If you'd like to learn more or book a session with a consciousness coach, I will leave the description or the website link to Divine Healing in the description. And you can get in touch then with Chetna. But thank you so much, Chetna, for being here today and sharing everything with us that you have.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.